Hey, so welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a recap of the Haunting of Hill House, Season 1, Episode 6, Two Storms. I think that's the name of it. So, obviously it opens on a somber note. Theo and Shirley are getting Nell ready for the wake. And they're waiting for the other members of the family to get there. And so, while they're waiting, they're talking. And it was Luke and Steve were the ones to show up first. Now, Luke, Steve, and the father, they flew in together, but the father went back to the hotel, which I'm assuming is to get himself together, thoughts together. But Luke and Steve arrived first. And so, of course, Luke is having a difficult time. I mean, it's his twin sister. And he was hesitant at first to go up to see her. And of course, they were very, patient with him and putting him at ease, and basically reassuring him that everything is okay, that they're there, the whole thing. And so Steve said he would just walk up with him, and if he wants to turn back, then that's fine too. He'll just go back with him. So Steve and Luke walk up, and surprisingly, it was Steve that broke first. And so he ended up having to walk away first, and Luke was up there for a little while longer before he walked away. And so Steve was standing at the little bar they have in the back of the room that Theo was was helping herself to on the regular. And so there's like this, the little waiting room outside, and they're, sitting out there. So while they're all out there, Steve is making himself a drink, and then he turns around and he sees Nell there, standing there by the coffin. Or this entity, whatever this is. And then he's like, okay, he's freaking out again. Because remember, the first time he saw her was when in his apartment. At that time, he didn't know she was dead until everything else happened. So he turns around and like, okay, he's freaking out. He thinks it's just, the stress and the grief. So then he turns back around and she's a lot closer. So he ends up walking out back into the waiting room where everybody was sitting. And Theo was like, okay, so what's happening? What's going on? So I guess she's trying to figure out he's found out what happened to her in the house. And he was like, well, Shirley spoke with the coroner, so she would know more about it than I do. And that's when she told him that she hung herself and she had a broken neck. And Luke said a broken neck. And it was like, well, why would she go back to the house? And who was it, Theo or somebody said, oh, for mom. And Shirley was like, well, she was just a kid, when she was, when mom died, because obviously her and Luke are twins. She's like, you were, 6 years old? And Luke was like, yeah, he doesn't remember anything about that time. And so, while they're talking, the doorbell rings, and it's their father. So he finally arrives. And this is the first time they've been in the same room since, I guess, a few years earlier when they got married. So he walks in, and it was an awkward situation. They really didn't know what to say to each other. He was stumbling and stammering over his words. When he first walked in, I think it was Shirley that said something to him first, like, asked him how he was doing or something like that. But then he saw them as children, like those little kids from so long ago. And then, the camera ripped around, and of course they were adults again. And so he's just standing there, this is, one of those moments that families experience after they lose a loved one. He doesn't know what to say. He's basically estranged from all of his children. And they really don't know what to say. So eventually, Shirley was like, do you want to go see her? So they walk in and see her. They walk in behind him. And he was very appreciative of Shirley. He said, she did a good job. You just didn't make small talk, not too much makeup, but she looks beautiful, you did a great job. And then of course he had to excuse himself to go to the bathroom, so she told him where the bathroom was. And so he's walking down the hall and kind of looking around, just taking note of everything. I'm assuming this is the first time he's been to their house, this is the business side of their house. So he's walking looking for the bathroom, and then you realize, okay, he's walking a long time to get to his bathroom, because you did say it was at the end of the hall to the left or something like that. And so he's walking and walking and walking. And then you realize he's back in the house. So he's standing there just looking around, and then there was this loud crash. This huge chandelier in the foyer fell. And so for a minute, he's standing there and he sees his younger self. He, obviously when they were still living in the house, he comes downstairs and he's like, oh goodness. So he saw that. And then eventually the mom came down. He was like, well, where were you? You weren't in bed. She was like, I don't know. I must have been sleepwalking or something. They just kind of breezed past that, like, you were sleepwalking. Okay. So now they're trying to figure out how did this happen? What's going on? Now at the same time, there's this huge big storm going on. Now keep in mind, during when they all meeting up at the house, there's a storm going on too. So then Nelly and Luke come downstairs to find out what's going on. And she was so cute. She's like, what happened to the chandelier? And her mom was like, it's the chandelier, honey. They fell, and everything's gonna be okay. Of course, she's trying to put them at ease. And then I think Theo came down. Was it Theo? I can't remember if it was, I think Theo may have come down next to see what's going on, and Steve, and the dad asked Steve to help him move the chandelier to the side so nobody gets hurt. And then they hear another crash, and it was Shirley coming downstairs, like her window just exploded. So the window in her room is now broken. So she sends them into the kitchen to make some hot chocolate, just to put them at ease. While the mom sat on the steps with Nell, and the power went out. So of course they all screaming and oh my goodness and da 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 da. So the dad was like, okay, I'm gonna let me get the flashlights, and Steve went with the flashlights and the battery, and somehow Nell got separated. So she found herself in the I don't know if it's the red room. And so she's obviously terrified, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. Then she sees there's a flash of thunder, and then she sees the bent neck lady, and the mom gets her and picks her up and puts her at ease. And so they're sitting down trying to put batteries, put batteries in the remote. So Lord and the flashlights. And so Theo is standing with Nell, and she was basically holding her hand while the rest of them were sitting down getting the things together, getting the battery and the flashlights together. And so before you know, they turn around. They're just talking, just the parents are talking and trying to keep just the conversation light to keep the kids, keep them at ease. And so they turn around. Theo didn't realize that Nell was gone. She thought she was still holding her hand. So they turn around, and now everybody's in a panic. They don't know what's going on with her, what happened to her. So now they're all running around the house looking for Nell. So at this point, we don't know what happened to poor little Natalie. Okay, so they flash back to the funeral home, and they're all sitting down, and I think Steve was telling a story about Nell. And Theo got upset and was like, yeah, I know the story. We were all there. Why don't we share some stories that we don't know? And of course, at this point, Theo was drunk. And Steve kept saying, it's this word that she kept using that she made up word, and Aunt so-and-so would tell her that was a made up word, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so Theo finally said puffalopes. And I was like, yeah, that was it. That's it. And she was like, the puffalopes, the puffy envelopes, basically, was what she was referring to. And I think she said, well, we don't even know where she got that word. And so that's when the father chimed in. It was like, she got it from your mother. That's what your mother would call them. And so they were all kind of sitting around. She was like, yeah, because Nell used to write letters all the time. She used to write letters to Santa. And, she would never ask for anything for herself. She would always ask for things for you guys. And he said that we didn't have the heart to correct her, because it was just something innocent. There was something innocent and genuine about her that they wanted to nurture, this caring part of her character. And so she's like, yeah, she would always ask for she asked for a typewriter for Steve, and she asked for a camera for Shirley, and he said, and then we would always make sure that we got what she asked for. And then Steve told a story about the bear. They pitched a tent in the yard and made s'mores and the whole thing, and how they were afraid. Steve was out there, and he was pretending to be a bear, and he was like tapping on the tent to scare her, Nell and Luke, and Nell put him at ease. It was like, oh, don't worry about it. We're safe in here. It's a magical tent. That whole story. Children. And then Steve gets up. Oh, then Shirley says her piece, because she's, obviously she's angry. She was like, Shirley knows basically what suicide does to a family after experiencing that with their mom. And she was like, I can't believe she would do this after she know like the pain and the heartache and what's left behind. And then Steve gets up and he finally confronts his father and was like, so, you know, in all these letters that she wrote you, because the father said that she would write me once a month. And he was like, well, all these letters that she wrote you, did she ever get an indication that there was something wrong? And he said, no, she would just talk about, you know, the Santa letters, and then she would, you know, just tell me what, you know, what's going on in her everyday life. And they wanted to believe that maybe there was more to it, because at this point, they still haven't got any real clarity on what happened in that house that night and what happened with their mom. It's just not something that he's discussed with them. And that's the main reason why they're so upset with him and why they're so estranged. Just because at this point, we don't know what he experienced in that house, and in his mind, him not telling them is protecting them. So he said, so Steve was like, for once, just give us a straight answer. And he was like, he said, you're right. Well, so what do you want to know? And so it was Miss Dudley that found Nell. And he said, well, you know, I got it. She called me right after she called the police, saying that she had seen the car. And she had gone in and she saw Nell. And she actually apologized to me because when she went in and saw Nell, she got sick and she threw up. This is Miss Dudley. And Steve starts going to him like, there's more to the story and they can't be it. And then they started trading stories. And he was saying, they were saying how she called him that day. So remember, she was making the rounds. She had called Steve. He sent her voicemail. She had called Shirley. Shirley was meeting with the client, so she couldn't talk to her. Sent her the voicemail. And then Shirley ended up calling Steve. Steve ended up calling her to let her know that he was checking on Luke. And so, of course, Luke was like, well, yeah, Steve was like, the whole reason she was calling us is because she was worried about you. And that's when her dad said, well, she called me. She called me that night. And, you know, then it started up again, the whole thing. And he starts ripping into his father about fostering the psychosis that, the father said, she told me that the bent neck lady was back. He was like, Steve was like, see, there it is, mental illness. You know, you've always fostered this, you know, this fantasy that she had, and that you're culpable in her death, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And Shirley chimes in and basically like, you're in no place to talk about that, because for all you can say to him, you actually took those stories, wrote a book, and made money off them. So as far as I'm concerned, you're just as guilty. So at this point, she doesn't know that Theo took the money. And so they're going back and forth and telling her, you know, you need to calm down and you're drunk. And she's like, no, Theo's drunk. I'm just pissed off. And then eventually Theo admitted, I took the money. I took the money and I paid for medical school. And basically I made a life for myself. And so, of course, Shirley got so pissed. She was like, wait a minute, you've been living under my roof, taking this money and in the royalties and the whole thing. And then we find out what the secret was. Now, if you remember, Theo and, what's his name, Kevin, is that the husband's name? Was on the front porch that night when he had mentioned that she had found the checkbook to the other account. And at first it made you think, oh God, is he having an affair? Is he, storing money? But I'm thinking, then you think about, like, would her sister be on board with that if she really knew that her husband was, would she hide that from her sister? But we find out that the secret is Kevin had been taking the royalty checks as well. Shirley didn't know about it. And the reason he was taking the money was because he kept telling Shirley that they cannot keep giving all these discounts and breaks and these kind of things. They can't survive financially doing that. And for some reason, she wasn't listening to him, and it was causing a lot of financial issues. And so he took the money to keep their business afloat. And also, they got to live. They have two children that they have to raise. And so it's like, she wouldn't see sense. So he was taking the money behind her back. And now she feels embarrassed because she's like, I've been going at him all these years for the blood money and the books and the whole thing. And she was, she was in her, I guess, her righteousness. And, she felt some kind of way about it. And the whole time, he had been taking the money behind her back. And so now she feels humiliated. She feels like Theo humiliated her by not telling her and living in her house, because knowing how she felt about that. And of course, the betrayal of her husband, who was taking the money behind her back. Even though it was for a good reason, she still, felt some kind of way about it. And she basically told Theo that she had to find some place to live. She had to get out. And she told Kevin he had to leave too. And so she walked in. She's obviously she's crying and upset. She walks back into the room where the wake is going to be held, the funeral. And Theo was like, she told to Kevin, like, okay, don't really have to move out. It's like, bitch, this is not the time or the place to bring that up. Shut up. Just leave her alone. And then Kevin was like, just give her some time. And Theo was like, I need more vodka. And so he ends up taking her, following her downstairs to show her where the extra bottles of liquor is. And so while Shirley was in there sitting next to Nell's box, she was like, oh my God, who did this? And I'm like, I'm looking at the thing like, okay, all of y'all were just in the same room arguing. So when did anybody have time to get away to do anything? So she walks through there, like, what are you talking about? What's going on? And so they go in and they see coins put on Nell's eyes. And she's like, oh, who would do this? And I'm thinking to myself, girl, they was all standing in front of you, cussing and fussing and going off. You guys are all getting into it. So, So now, and then they're going back and forth about this whole coin, who did what, and then the power goes out. And so now, of course, they're all going to find flashlights. So it's like deja vu. Remember when they were back in the house and the kid, the storm, and the power goes out? Here they're experiencing this again. Okay, so the power goes out. They're running around trying to find flashlights, okay? They supposedly have a backup generator. It didn't kick in. And they're finding out that their house is the only one that's been affected. Okay, so we flash back to the house, back to the Hill house, where they're all looking for Nellie. So they've separated. The kids are downstairs, so the parents have gone to look for Nellie. The mom comes up to I'm assuming that's the room that was once locked, that they could never find the key to. So the knob is shaking, she goes over and she opens the door and she sees this little boy sitting in a wheelchair, and it was like one of them old-fashioned like wooden wheelchairs. And so he's moseying along and she looks and she starts following him. And of course the father's running around, he's still trying to find Nell, and then he sees the flashlight, the wife's flashlight. So now he's looking for her while he's trying to look for Nellie. So he sees her, and then it's just one of those situations that you would see in any haunted house where you see something and then you start following it, and then you turn the corner and it's not there, and you turn around and it's behind you, it's walking down another hall, this whole thing, right? So now he's running around trying to find her, and he eventually finds her. She's kneeled down on the floor doing something, and he runs over to her. It was almost like she was in some kind of psychosis. It was like she was sleepwalking. And so she looked at him and said, I had the most amazing dream or something, she said. And then all hell breaks loose. You hear the kids screaming. So they run down, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and the kids are downstairs screaming. They're still by the stairs in the little foyer. And they get down there and they said something is in the house, and it was growling. I think it was a dog, and we don't know. Okay, so the father, they say, oh, we're in the kitchen. So the father goes in the kitchen, and you see Nell. Okay, so we flash back to the house, and the father, he's standing by the coffin with Luke, and the lights are still out. And he was like, where did you go? And he said, I just need to get some air, or whatever the case may be. And so they started talking, and the father basically said that, that Nell didn't kill her. I know she didn't kill herself, and too, the bent neck lady, the whole thing. So they're going back and forth about the whole story. And he said, what about mom? He said, that is more complicated. And so they all start coming back. Shirley and Steve. And I'm thinking Luke is going to let it ride. No, he's like, what do you mean, Dad? They was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? You said that you don't think that Nell killed herself, and then mom's story is complicated. What do you mean? So now the whole argument breaks out again. He was like, the father finally said, and there's something going on with the father too. Because it's like, when they talk to him, he like turned his head, he's talking to somebody or something. And then he talks to them. So we don't, what's going on with Dad? Who is he talking to? But the father's like, but Steve was like, you see, mental illness runs in the family. First mom, then now Dad talking to himself. And, it's just, and then Steve yells out, the wrong parent died. And next thing you hear this loud crash. They look behind them. Nell's coffin crashed to the floor. And her body is kind of like half out. It was just so, oh my God, like, it was, okay, just the thought. So they're standing there. And they go over, and the cough, and then the light comes back on. So her coffin crashed, the light comes back on, and so they see her hanging out of the coffin. So they go over, very somber moment. They kind of straighten the coffin up and get her situated back in the coffin. And they were just quiet, just looking like what just happened, you know, because after the father said, you know, the house killed Nell and your mom too, and you know, of course Steve, he doesn't believe in any of that, even though he's seen what he's experienced, he still doesn't believe it. And the father she kissed Nell on the forehead, and then he walked out. And he was like, "It's all right, boys." They didn't hear him as he was walking out, but he walked out. And I guess they agreed to Steve and Luke decided to go back to, I guess, the hotel. It's been a long, trying, emotional night. And so Shirley decides, you know, she was like, you know what, her makeup is messed up. I gotta fix it. You know, I have to fix it. You know, I can't leave her like this. So she went downstairs to get her kit. And she finds Theo and Kevin in a somewhat compromising position. And she sees them in the storeroom, and then she turns around and walks away. And then she looks into the room where they do the bodies are, the embalming, and somebody is sitting there at the table. This entity has taken the form of someone, I don't know, and basically had a glass and kind of like raised it to her, and she runs out of the house, she runs out. And so we flash back to the house, and they're all, you know, all around. They're like, "What happened to you? What happened to you?" And Nell was like, I was here. You know, I was screaming and no one could hear me, but I was here the whole time. So, this house. And so, just as they were walking out, we flash back to the house, the funeral, the wake, and Steve had already walked on ahead. And so Luke was standing there, he was just looking. And then he was playing something, you know, some odd voiceover in his head about something Nell was saying. And he turns to walk away. And then the camera pans back, and you see Nell, obviously she's still in her coffin. And then you see the bent neck lady standing by her. And you hear Nell as a child saying, "I'm here. I was here. Nobody saw me." And that's how the episode ended. So, yeah, that was a lot. So, very emotional. I think the episode was more emotional than scary, this particular episode, at least for me. So leave, you know, your thoughts in the comment section, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.